There we go. Hello and welcome to the iGaming Next podcast, episode 12, which is partnered by Pragmatic Solutions. And today we have with us Peter Paul the Joy. Peter Paul the Joy. Am I pronouncing this correct, Peter Paul?
Yeah, it's fine. The Goeij. I will listen to anything.
Peter Paul de Goeij. I'm sorry about that. As a neighboring Swedish person, I should be better at this. But anyhow, it's really nice to have you with us today, Peter Paul.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You are the managing director of the trade association Speel Verantwoord, basically in the Netherlands. Can you introduce yourself a little bit, what you do, and what are the targets of Speel Verantwoord?
Yeah, so my name is Peter Paul de Goeij. I'm the director of Speel Verantwoord, the Dutch trade association for online gambling operators. I have a background in telecommunications, legal and regulatory affairs, public affairs. I also run a consulting business called Quod Bonum, and I joined the gambling industry back in 2013, so relatively new. But first as an employee for a lottery company, and I've been focusing on the online gambling industry since July 1st last year, when I started for Speel Verantwoord. Speel Verantwoord is a trade association set up in 2014. Initially, it was predominantly an association set up to bring about a change to the legislative system in the Netherlands, allowing online companies to apply for a license. And in February 2019, the bill allowing online gambling was passed the Senate, and that invoked basically a program of change. So we're in the middle of a change towards becoming a full association with a new name, and this will happen over the coming few months. Basically, Speel Verantwoord means play responsibly. That is one of the goals that we are working towards. So consumer protection is one of the goals that we're focusing on, aside from the representing the industry with stakeholders and politicians in the Netherlands.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Paul. So the Netherlands is an interesting market, of course. It's been discussed to implement these regulations for many years. There's been many delays along the way. If I understand it correctly, like you mentioned, the regulation was actually passed in 2013, but it's been delayed to implement it, and it's still pending when it's actually going to be implemented. Can you give an update on what is the current situation in the Netherlands right now?
So indeed, the legislation, or the draft legislation, the bill was introduced in June 2013. So exactly 7 years from now. It took quite a while before the bill was passed and was basically adopted by the lower house, and then another 3 to 4 years before it was adopted by the Senate. Like I said, that happened in February 2019, and ever since we are working on the lower legislation or regulations, if you will, and the policy, because in the beginning they decided they would bring the whole package, that is the law plus the regulations and the policy, in one move, and enact this whole package in one go. This has, I think, led to some delay, because if you stop working, or if there is another round of questions on one of the documents, all the documents will have to wait before they are enacted. We are now at, I would say, probably the fifth round of delays. And last week there was a debate in or so there was a vote after a debate in the House of Commons on the decree that accompanies the new law. And as a result, we may face another delay of probably 2 months. The minister said that he expects a couple of months.
So when is it expected to be enacted now with this delay?
So it's probably going to be March 1st, 2021. Yeah.
Okay.
That's basically where we are now. The decree has been debated upon in Parliament because it's not legislation. The MPs don't get to vote on the decree itself, but they have the possibility to ask questions and to suggest amendments or to adopt motions. Trying to convince government to change or amend things.
Yeah, because a decree is kind of like an order more than
Yes,
something.
it sits below. So on the legal, so on the legal letter, it sits below legislation, sits below the act, but it's part of the complete package. And even below that, you also have policy, and that is something that we will be that will be worked on right now by the gambling regulator, the KSA, and they're expected to come out with the policy containing also the draft legislation and the legislation requirements over the summer. So hopefully they will be able to send something for market consultation by the end of August. Hopefully halfway through August, but remains to be seen.
Yeah, so right now we don't actually know how the framework for the legislation will look like, right? And there are some details, so to say. There's this, cooling off period of 30 months that if you have offered gambling services to Dutch players within 30 months of applying for the license, you are automatically declined.
It's a good point that you raise. It was 30 months, but as a result of the votes and motions the last 2 weeks, this will now be probably be 32 months. So it is likely to keep track with the expected further delay.
So this has been increased several times now, right? Because it was 2 years, it was first, and then someone wanted, it was voted to be 5 years, but okay, so now it's 32 months. That is
it's 32 months. But the way it works is that you from the moment that you apply for a license, you have to stay away from how do you say that, from breaking one of the prioritization criteria. So if you have acted against one or more of the prioritization criteria in the period of 32 months before your license application will be rejected. And so this is basically how the cooling off period will work. But this cooling off period, like you rightfully said, it's still draft, and it still has to come out. And this is what we're all waiting on from the gambling regulator. But we do have, I would say, a very good picture already of what this will entail, because the decree and the ministerial regulations have already been consulted. I don't expect that the ministerial regulations in its final form will deviate a lot from what was consulted. So we already have a very, I would say, very concrete picture of what it looks like. And we already know what will happen to the cooling off period. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. So we have to wait until these documents will be published.
Okay, I want to say on the cooling off period a little bit, because it was quite interesting to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Pitbull, but that is a quite unique implementation, this cooling off period. That doesn't exist when previous regulations have been implemented in other markets, right?
Yeah, I've been trailing the various regulations or re-regulations of European markets, as comparison to what is happening in the Netherlands, and I haven't seen this happening elsewhere, outside from the fact that it's now being contemplated on being copied by, I think, the German regulators. Yeah, they are looking at the Dutch model of the cooling off period. But I think there's a good reason for that, because this cooling off period is, I would say, well, to say the least, legally vulnerable. So if it gets attacked in court, I'm not going to put a bet on, which side is going to win. I think there's a fair chance that it won't stand judicial test. But it remains to be seen whether operators will put it to the legal test.
Yeah, because I would assume they will, because there are quite a lot of the big players who would be excluded from applying for a license when it will come into effect, as it stands right now.
Yeah,
right?
so it's hard for me to step in their shoes and weigh all the things that they have to weigh before you take such a step. But the fact of the matter is that legal processes in general take a long waiting time before you have a result in the highest instance. And especially in the Netherlands, these cases, can take 1.5 to 2 years. So I would say, pick wisely, pick your battles. But it's not up to me.
Interesting. So there's a question coming in here now, actually, from Yvonne Jasma, who's asking, what's the impact of this cooling off period for the players after the market is open?
So if I think the impact will be how do you say it, medium or like, it's hard to say, because there will be players that are used to play with operators that are told to cool off, basically. But as soon as these operators come onto the market and do get their license, these players can then play with the regulated offer. So I think there will be an effect, but it will be limited. What is the most important thing here is that this cooling off period isn't how do you say it, unlimitedly or I can't think of the right word, but isn't into extended by another few months. The minister made it very clear that with every extension of the cooling off period, this whole measure becomes more vulnerable. So
interesting. Thank you, Yvonne, for that question. On to something else now, Peter Paul. I wanted to ask you, so what is on everyone's mind when you want to implement a good regulation for the gaming environment is the channelization of the market.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit of what are your goals, would you say, for the channelization rate with the Dutch legislation, and how do you think this will all play out?
So from the outset, Speel Verantwoord has always been pleading to maximize channelization, to make the Dutch licensing system so attractive that consumers actually have choice and can play with their operator of choice and play under the protection of the Dutch licensing system. Now, from the start, it was contemplated having two different tax levies, one for the existing land-based industry and one for the online industry. And after extensive lobbying, of course, this was changed, and there now is an overall tax rate of it currently stands at 30.1%, but is expected to jump back to 29%.
It's a temporary increase, if I understand correctly. Right?
Yeah, this was a temporary increase to deal with, this is kind of well, it's not funny, but it's cynical almost, because the state did get less money in tax receipts because the law was still not enacted. They temporarily increased the tax rate to 30.1% to pay for the for basically the lesser revenue that came in. But anyway, so it is expected to be 29% across the board. If you compare it to other European gambling markets, that is very high. I'm not sure if I can say the highest, but it's definitely in the top 3 of gambling tax around Europe.
How does it compare to some of the other tax rates?
I know that very recently in Denmark they decided to raise the tax to 28 or 27.5 or something like that, which they are screaming murder about in Denmark, because this will be very detrimental for the high channelization rate that they currently have, and they expect the channelization rate to go down dramatically as a result of this tax increase. So this gives a reason to look very closely at what the current tax rate in the Netherlands will mean for channelization. But I'm convinced that it's not impossible to get at a high channelization rate. The rate that the government set out to reach is 80%, which is a how do you say that? It's a tough goal, but we as Speel Verantwoord are committed to work together with all stakeholders and the government to arrive at the highest channelization rate possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, 80% channelization seems it doesn't seem like the most ridiculous targets. I mean, that's I mean, when the Swedish market opened up, that was I think the channelization was touching even 90% at some point.
Yeah, this I'm also trailing what's happening in Sweden a little bit.
Now it's decreasing, of course.
Yeah, it's decreasing, and you have to look at channelization per part of the gambling market. So if you will, you have to look at land-based and you have to look at online. Land-based, I don't think the channelization rate ever gets below 90 in Sweden. But that tells you something about the channelization rate of the online sector as well. So it will be something that we will be closely monitoring, and also we intend to report on this and work with all stakeholders to get the highest percentage we can.
Yeah, now, and something that has been negatively impacting the channelization rate is obviously these measures that are being taken in certain markets during the corona epidemic, obviously with Sweden imposing strict deposit limits. Now the UK market is all of a sudden the parliament is going out to say that they want to be a lot more strict within the market, and also implementing tough restrictions, both in terms of deposit limits, but also marketing wise. Is this something that is being discussed in the Netherlands as well? Are you scared that this will have a detrimental impact on the re-regulation as well?
Oh, we always have to be, prudent. We have to be careful because sometimes out of the best intentions comes the worst regulations. In some instances, regulations are introduced to, for instance, on betting, banning certain types of betting. Are invented or are introduced to combat match fixing, and what these measures do is push players away from the regulated offer, because players will want to put bets out on certain types of sports events or in live betting, and if you ban it on the regulated side, people will try to find it, and they go to unregulated sites, and on unregulated sites, match fixing is much more likely to happen. So although it was done with the best intention, and we have the same intentions. We want to combat match fixing, and we want to eradicate match fixing, but we think you don't arrive at that goal by these banning and blocking measures. So as coming back to your question on COVID-19, what we did see in the Netherlands, I think I haven't seen it so much in other markets, is that from the land-based industry, there were signals that there were supposedly operators active, or resellers of operators active and trying to attract people to a corona-free or a corona-safe online casino. Luckily, after checking thoroughly, none of the members of Speel Verantwoord or any of the bigger well-known online gambling brands were doing this. But you see sometimes that signals are pushing towards a certain measure to be taken, and then these measures are not really helpful. So again, luckily enough, it stopped. I think there were a number of marketing sites doing this. As far as I know, they have stopped doing this. And the biggest problem of increased participation in unregulated gambling was in unregulated land-based gambling in the Netherlands.
Okay, interesting. So, because what it seems to be trending a little bit in Europe, at least, is like I said, Sweden implements the deposit limits, and then because of that, the UK is now looking at similar restrictions, and it's almost a little bit like a domino effect that is taking place. Do you get the sense that is what is happening as well? That the next regulator doesn't want to be worse than the other one.
Yeah, exactly. So it is almost like a race to be the toughest regulator,
who can be the toughest? Yeah,
or the toughest member of parliament. And again, I don't question the intentions of the MPs or the regulators, but sometimes these regulations are misinformed or baseless, because there are certain fears, and these fears are sometimes even created, and then they act on these fears and take measures that look very tough and look very good in public opinion. If you will ask someone in the street, do you think that gambling advertising is very irritating, they will all say yes. But the question really should be whether gambling advertising has adverse effects on the population, and should be restricted. Just as an example. So it's let's be honest. It's not easy to be a politician nowadays. So even a politician is under pressure to come up with strict regulations and to act the will of the people. And this is how the biggest mistakes are made, I think. Even in the case of Sweden, I'm absolutely convinced that the minister has the best intentions, but I think next time, or maybe even about these regulations, he should speak with the industry first and act on the basis of facts, and then he probably would have found out in time that this measure is not going to help.
And that is, of course, why trade associations are so important, because you are pretty much the only voice that can deliver this information. So do you work closely with the government? Do you communicate with them? What are your efforts to educate?
As close as can be. Of course, we have to to be as transparent as possible, and in this light, we speak with everybody. So we also speak with the incumbent operators, the land-based operators, our future competition, and I think this is the basis of a healthy gambling market. Yes, we do work closely together with the government, with MPs that want to have a discussion with us, and with the gambling regulator.
Yeah, and I would assume that this is the key, right? Because the misinformation and the perception of the industry is perhaps different from reality, of course. And as the iGaming industry is not the easiest, perhaps to get the attention that it needs to get the properties matches sometimes.
Out of all the subjects that a politician has to choose from, even the politicians that have gambling in their list of subjects that they have to trill and be on committees on, and this is probably the least. Well, I'm not going to use the word sexy, but it's the least. It's very, very hard to get a big result on this subject. So the MPs that are taking an interest, I commend them, and I invite them to work with us to come to a better gambling market. But I always say gambling has no friends. It's not a subject that anybody likes. There is no minister that that has a true interest in gambling. Only when tax needs to be collected, gambling is interesting, and that's a fact of life. And I'm not complaining about it, but it's good to remember yourself sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, in the longer term picture, this is something we've discussed previously in the podcast too. But it's a perception problem that the industry has that obviously has been created through the years with its very aggressive marketing.
Yes, absolutely.
Quick money, win, win a yacht and become rich and all these things. But it should be perceived as an entertainment-led industry.
Yes.
I mean, and as a trade association, I think, isn't that something that you want to pull your members together in kind of a common goal to change that perception?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very valid point. I think a large part of a large chunk of the reason why we are in the situation we are now, why we have such a bad image, we have to look at ourselves and what has happened in the past, and how some companies have behaved in the past, and it's going to be hard to change this perspective and to change the image of the gambling industry. And then even when 99% of the companies are doing their best and are sincerely trying to change and improve the way gambling companies operate, there still will be rotten apples that are going to draw us back into the boat we are in today. But so the UK is an interesting one, because I think the market was regulated in 2005, and I'm not going to say it was a free for all, but they were basically given a lot of freedom, and especially on the field of marketing that you just raised. I think the UK has shown that it is hard as a single operator to restrict or restrain yourself in marketing and going into the market battle, the fight for advertising space, etc., whilst being afraid to lose out on your competitor at the same time. So it's a very it's a conundrum, and it's not easily solved. I believe that if you self-regulate from the get-go, so this is basically a chance that we have in the Netherlands. If you self-regulate from the get-go and ensure that the total size and the tone of the marketing is not intrusive, which will be hard. That's what Sweden showed us. But if you start with self-regulating and show politicians and policymakers and stakeholders that the industry is actually capable of restraining itself and ensuring that the Dutch consumer isn't inundated with gambling advertising, then this is definitely the way to go. Because if you don't, then the regulator will step in, and politicians and ministers and MPs will call for very stringent regulations, and in some cases even ban outright gambling advertising, which would be totally wrong.
Yeah, and I think the Netherlands have already taken some strict measures when it comes to the gambling advertisement. Are correct? The motion is to ban advertisement between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Yeah, so basically, the watershed has recently been raised from the previous 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. On television, radio, for gambling advertising, excluding advertising for lotteries, because that is allowed from 7 p.m. the way it was before. But it's true, we already have a comprehensive set of regulations, which in part is self-regulating. So advertising in the Netherlands, like in the UK and other markets, I think is self-regulation, and it works considerably well. I have to say, even in my previous capacity as an operator, I know it worked pretty quick and very well. But we now have to ensure that with the onset of the regulated online gambling market, this new part of the market also is regulated appropriately.
Yeah, and I think looking at the Swedish market, and like you mentioned, seeing what can happen if the operators become too aggressive with an India casino losing their license even. A lot of the operators were scared that they might lose the licenses as well, and I think the results are from all of this is that the way that the major operators are now doing marketing is shifting away from this aggressive stance. They have realized that they cannot. It's not just a free for all any longer. They kind of have to restrain a bit. From one thing to that, last topic that I want to talk to you about today, Peter Paul, is going back to where we began actually with the delays in the legislation, and from what I understand it now is it's now being discussed to implement the licensing system from the 1st of March, but this also clashes with the general elections in the Netherlands. And from what I understand, it there are voices within Parliament, or the expectation is that there is some voices within the Parliament that will use the fact that it's happening so close to the election to try to delay the legislation even further and potentially even collapsing the whole effort of implementing the licensing system. Can you talk about that? Do you think that it will happen? Is there a chance that the legislation will actually not come into play at all?
So based on past experience, I can not give you any guarantees. I think the last option, the collapse of the system and no licensing system coming to the Netherlands would be, I would say, an extraterrestrial or a nuclear option. I don't think that is very likely to happen, but I will not say I guarantee 100% that it doesn't. I think if the act is signed into power by the king, as is necessary in the Netherlands, per the 1st of March, we will be just in time. And what I mean to say with that is that the elections, from top of mind, I think it's the 21st or 25th of March, but somewhere halfway through March or towards the end of March. So if the act is signed into power by the king per the 1st of March, the act does not the act and the supporting documents, so the lower regulations and policy, do not risk being declared controversial, which would mean a standstill. So Parliament doesn't discuss any of the subject because it's too important. I think the risk that we will get the act after the elections, so the enactment of the act after the elections, is fairly limited. I do have very good hope that that the minister, in discussions with the land-based parties and the industry, will come to a mutually agreeable later date, because that is what the minister promised in the debate 2 weeks ago in the lower house. And the minister actually said, when asked, so how much are you thinking about? How much more delay are you thinking about concretely? And then he said a couple of months, and a couple in Dutch is 2.
Yeah.
So
Like in Malta,
you know,
where there will be
a little
different time and
calculation,
speed.
yeah,
Yeah.
a little calculation brings us to the 1st of March. So I expect that this gives the extra leeway that the land-based industry were calling for to cope with the detrimental effects of COVID-19 on their operations. So that's my take on it. And to me, it's incomprehensible, even considering the possibility that the whole thing would fall flat on its face after more than 7 years of debating it. You know, everyone that is working on this with the best intentions cannot see that as a possible outcome of this process. So only the malicious parties to this whole process would think in such a way. I cannot see that happen, because the fact of the matter is, the Dutch consumer has been playing without the protection of the Dutch government. The KSA is, as far as I know, is ready to start regulating the online gambling market. And I know that my members are ready to come onto the online gambling market and work towards the common goal of the highest channelization rate we can achieve in the Netherlands.
Great, Paul. Very, very interesting. And let's hope that the legislation comes into effect before it becomes a teenager, basically.
Yeah.
But hopefully,
let's not bet a bottle of wine on it.
no, exactly. Knock on wood, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paul, for
Thank you.
coming on today. It's really interesting to learn and understand what's happening in Netherlands. Exciting times, and hopefully things will pan out as planned, and not any further delays. Basically, is there anything else you'd like to add today that we haven't covered yet?
So I saw another question from Yvonne.
Yes.
Do you think that we can get an attractive enough online game of chance offer for players in the Netherlands with all the restrictions? My short answer is yes. I'm absolutely convinced that we can get an attractive enough online offer. But it is, we have to make sure that we can open this market up as quickly as possible, so we can get Dutch players in the, let's say, safe online gambling market under the oversight of the KSA.
Great. Thank you again, Yvonne, for contributing with questions for us today.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul. I wish you a beautiful Tuesday afternoon here in Malta. It's 30 degrees and sunshine, and I'm about to go out and enjoy it as much as I can as well.
So enjoy, and thanks very much. And we'll be enjoying, I think we're going off, but we'll be enjoying Dutch summer, which is, a little bit of rain, a little bit of sunshine.
Fantastic. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.